A major problem we face today is that young people are becoming less involved in world news. Even in a time where information is easily accessible with things like news apps and the addition of current event sections to many social medias, younger generations have become less informed than older generations. According to Walter E. Williams, a professor at George Mason University, 60% of students surveyed could not find Saudi Arabia or Iraq on a world map. Our goal was to tackle this problem head on and find a way for students in our school to get information on world events without having to change their daily routines. The solution was to add a segment to the 810 that would briefly cover news for the day.
For our first step, we conducted our own survey with students at our school to get a better sense of how informed they felt that they were. We started with a basic question for every student. Would you consider yourself aware of what is going on in the world? Out of roughly 200 students that we interviewed, 43% said that they would generally consider themselves aware of what is happening in the world. 37.1% said that they only felt somewhat aware of the world events, while 19.8% said that they would not consider themselves aware at all. We were very surprised to see that such a large number of students felt uninformed about world events. This meant that there was a lot of room for improvement. The goal of our second question was to get an understanding of how frequently students made an effort to remain informed. We asked them, how often do you watch or read the news? 30.9% of students said every day, 59.7% said once or a few times a week, while 9.4% of students answered never. These results showed that the majority of students did not make an effort outside of their daily routines to follow up with the news. This meant that the only solution to fix this problem was to find a way to fit world news into the routines without changing them. The easiest way for us to work news into students' daily routines was to make it a part of something that they already watch, the 810. We asked students, if the 810 were to include information about what's going on in the world or community, would you be more interested? Results showed over 80% of students would be somewhat interested.
After we conducted our own research, we decided to look into what data had previously been collected on the subject. This included the article entitled Dumb American Youth, which was written by Walter E. Williams. In the article, he talks about how the youth as a whole are uninformed and willfully ignorant, and how this can lead to them making poor decisions in the future. This reinforced our idea that a well-informed population would result in better decisions being made and less reckless behavior in the future.
Jesse Hathaway, who is a credible writer for CBS News and tends to write his articles about budget and tax news, conducted his research on college students in which he used surveys as a way to find if they were ready for voting in the future. The students showed a lack of knowledge on many of the basics of our political system, which frightens many political leaders, about future presidential elections, with the result resting in the uninformed hand of voters. Considering that Hathaway's own research supports our claim that U.S. students aren't informed enough about current events, we believe it is very important for things to change.
Another helpful source we found was an article called Civic Engagement Strongly Tied to News Habits, written by Michael Barthel. He is a young journalism researcher and has been studying the relationship between how much a person watches their local news and how active they are in their community. This association can be applied to high schoolers as they become old enough to vote. In his research, he found that people who claim that they closely follow local news and people who use multiple sources to get their news were also highly active in local politics. He also found that people who gave their communities more positive ratings were also more likely to follow local news from multiple sources. These same people also rated their local media more positively in terms of how well they cover current events. More of his research shows that people who remain attached to their local communities make up a substantial percentage of the local news following, and a much larger percentage of them felt that their local media was doing a good job. Of the people interviewed who claimed that they always voted in local elections, the majority of them said that they closely follow news from multiple sources and rate their communities very highly.
Chris Roselle, a writer of the Topeka Capital Journal, is a researcher who focuses on the growing gap of knowledge between adults older than 65 and the youth. According to Roselle, only 14% of young voters voted in the 2014 midterm election in Kansas, but yet 66% of 65-year-olds or older voted in the election as well. As young adults ourselves, we know how inconvenient it can be to go and just have to watch the news. But instead of students having to find all their news from fake sources on the internet, they can instead get it from their school by putting it through the school news. There's a growing problem with uninformed voters having a major impact on decision making. Researcher Professor Arthur Lupia detailed that issue and the effects that it can have. Young people are presented with the ability to vote, but they are still not provided with the proper information to make themselves effective voters. By creating a current worldwide segment on the school news, students will want to become more involved and will be more interested in what's going on in the world around them.
Our first step towards achieving our goal was to get in contact with the teachers and students who manage the A10. We met up with Ms. Rizzoletti and discussed the best course of action for helping students stay informed through the A10. We eventually decided that the best method of achieving this goal would be to add a short segment to the morning announcements that would briefly cover the most important and recent events for the day. For our second step, we met with the students in charge of filming and editing the A10. We pitched them our idea of adding an additional news segment to the morning announcements, and they agreed to let us add the segment. So we filmed an example of the segment to be used as a template for them to follow. Our goal is to create an easily accessible source of information so that students can stay up to date on world news in a way that would establish an eagerness to learn for the rest of their lives. As the future of our country, we are responsible for making educated decisions so that we can leave a positive impact on the world.